Sanbonani Dumelang, good evening and welcome to episode 212 of the Private Property Podcast. I'm your host, Uzamantungwa Kumalo. It's a Wednesday edition of the Private Property Podcast. We're doing things slightly differently than how we usually do it on a Wednesday. But as usual, we're going to be bringing you a hot property topic and helping you better navigate your property journey. So do make sure that you've got your notes ready. Certainly be ready to engage with us as you often do on our social media platforms. You can follow myself on @Zamantungwa_K on Twitter as well as on Instagram. Well, this evening's conversation is one for the property investors. We're looking at a property investor's guide to surviving the pandemic. And I was saying to my guest, off air that if anything, the big aim of this conversation is to help, I say, the two kinds of property investors that we probably have out there. One who's trying to weather the financial storm that is COVID-19, because we've also seen a lot of property investors, struggling with the pandemic. Some of them, they're in their personal lives, their jobs have been affected, and they've had to make certain cuts that unfortunately do affect their property investments. And then, of course, there's the other bucket where there are investors who are looking to strike while the iron is hot, as it were, with many of them looking to take advantage of the historically low interest rates, but also looking to fill in the gaps that they're seeing in the market and the various opportunities that they're able to spot as they keep abreast with the latest in property. And we see quite a lot of opportunities coming up. I think if you're best positioned to be able to take advantage of them, this is probably a good time to go into that. So this conversation is about helping both kinds of entrepreneurs, those who probably need to find a mechanism to weather the financial storm and make tough decisions that will get them through to the other side, as it were, and also those who are now ready to make that bold move. Perhaps all these months you've been slightly scared, but you're now ready to do just that. Well, that is what we're going to be looking at this evening. I want to hear from you at home. Which bucket do you fall in? Are you the property investor who is currently struggling and trying to find different ways, to patch things up in order for your property portfolio to not be too negatively affected right now? Perhaps you're struggling with placing tenants, you're struggling with, your tenants paying on time. Or are you the property investor who is now ready to strike while the iron is hot, as well? Or you've already started doing that? I mean, we heard in the tail end of last year that one of our viewers had already bought 5 properties, all, fully bonded with APSA, and they're quite happy with the decision that they made. Perhaps you're in that position where you're now able to better take advantage of some of these opportunities. Do let us know down here below which bracket you think you fall in. Perhaps you're a slight combination of both. I want to hear from you. Now, as it is Wednesday, even though we're doing things slightly differently, something that is not different is that later on in the evening at 8 p.m., you can look forward to the First Time Home Buyers Show with St. Clarkson. Of course, that comes to your screens every single Wednesday at 8 p.m., where St. Clarkson has a conversation with somebody who has walked the first-time home buying journey. And if you at home have a great story about your first-time home buying journey, well, Esty wants to speak to you. Do slide into our DMs and share what that story is, and you could potentially be featured on the First Time Home Buyers Show with St. Clarkson on Wednesday at 8 p.m. Now, another show that you can look forward to is the Farming Podcast with Umbali Noko. Now, that comes to your screens every Tuesdays and Thursdays at 8 p.m. And if you've got an interest in agriculture, and it doesn't matter where in the agricultural value chain you have an interest in, well, that show is for you. Umbali, as a farmer herself, helps you through better understand what you can potentially anticipate. And she speaks to various experts within the agricultural landscape. So do make sure that you tune into the Farming Podcast every Tuesdays and Thursdays at 8 p.m. Now, as you know, I love saying over the weekend, we never leave you alone because Chad brings you the home shopper show rather at Saturdays and Sunday at 1 p.m. And that is a show that you can look forward to if you are currently shopping for a property in an estate or complex and you want to get a better sense of what you can expect should you move into that particular property. Well, do make sure that you tune into Chad every weekend as he brings you a great snapshot of some of what you can certainly expect. Now, one of the other things that I know you always expect from us is to always have a great giveaway up our sleeves. And we love delivering that one because, as you know, we are running the Sherlock Holmes competition. We kickstarted it 7 weeks ago. We're now in the 7th week of this 12-week long competition where every single week we get to give away a 5,000 Rand voucher to one lucky viewer at home. And in order for you to stand a chance of walking away with that voucher, all you have to do is to go onto our website on www.privateproperty.co.za and let us know where the riddle takes you. Now, the clue for week 7, I think this one is slightly difficult. I mean, the past few weeks have actually been slightly easy, but the clue for week 7 is in the sleepy hamlet of McGregor. Your idyllic family home awaits. With a garden made of vineyards, there's even extra space for granny. If you think you know where this riddle leads you, then do make sure that you go onto our website and enter the Sherlock Holmes competition. Now, something that you can look forward to later on this evening, we will be announcing the lucky winner of the 500 Rand cash spot prize for this competition. Remember, you have to watch until the end because if we call your name, you need to text us down below in order to claim that 500 Rand in cash. Well, to get us started with this conversation this evening, we are looking at a property investor's guide to surviving the pandemic. And our guest is somebody who needs no introduction. We are joined by Ekow Quagraine, who is the founder of B Grand Holdings. Ekow, good evening and thank you so much for joining us.
Good evening, Zama, and good evening to your viewers as well.
It's only a pleasure, it's always such a pleasure to talk property with you, Ekow. I think one of the big things with our conversation this evening is we've got so many property investors who are either, and I've seen this, it's either they're just struggling right now and are just trying to stay afloat, trying to get the right tenant, or some are just doing incredibly well, are able to add more properties into their portfolio, are finding really interesting deals to be a part of. And sometimes you're not the only person in the deal. You're working with other people to finance a particular deal or to structure a particular deal. I want us to, help both sets of investors when it comes to surviving this pandemic. Because I think one of the things that this pandemic is calling on so many of us is to be able to adapt, to pivot, but also to just, buckle up, especially if you're perhaps looking to make a big financial decision and you may not have the means to finance it. Let us perhaps, Ekow, start with, the property investors who are not doing so well, as opposed to those who are looking for, climbing higher and higher. Let's start with the basket that isn't doing so well. How can you best sort of help the property investors that are currently struggling in this economic climate?
Okay, so Zama, I think just to get straight to one of the points is to keep a gratitude mindset, right? Because that's what the pandemic provides and delivers to us in terms of the challenges and the calamities that we face. So the question now is, how do you then go about creating gratitude mindset? And the thing is, once you've created a gratitude mindset, you come from an angle of abundance mindset rather than a scarcity mindset, right? And with an abundance mindset, you will be able to focus on the limitless opportunities that's within the calamities that we're facing now. And I think a part of it is to step back and look and analyze and listen and understand what's going on. And I think by focusing on what you have and being grateful for what you have, you will be able to get that. So a question that probably one will ask is, how do you then develop a gratitude mindset? And to me, it's four basic principles that I follow every single day. Whether it's a good climate or a bad climate, is the same thing. The first thing is to focus on gratitude when you wake up. And by that meaning being thankful for the things that you have, right? And you do the same thing before you go to bed. Because remember, this pandemic has swept away a whole lot of people. And the fact that you are alive, we should be grateful for. The fact that you've made it to the night, it's a blessing. It's more than the material aspect of things that we're chasing. So I think once you're able to have that kind of attitude, then you'll be able to get somewhere. And what I also do, and what I did consistently during the pandemic, is to create what I called it the gratitude journal, where every single day when I woke up, I write down 5 ideas, minimum 3 ideas that's going to get me to positively move forward in life. And those are the things that you need to do. And when you do that, you will then basically start to express your gratitude by doing things that will make you feel happier, that will make you more positive about your life, instead of just worrying about feeling stressed and being frustrated. And that's one of the advice I can give.
I actually want us to move to a pragmatic, almost to do for struggling property investors, because I can already see some of them saying, okay, so mindset is important, and having an attitude of gratitude is an important trait. But the reality is, this is property, this is finance, they're struggling financially, and they need practical tools in terms of what to do from a financial perspective, because there isn't any amount of, gratitude, feeling gratitude that's going to, impact your bank balance. And I know a lot of, viewers, as much as you want to cultivate that kind of practice, which is very useful, you also need very practical tools in terms of what to do to financially get you into the right position. So I want us to help those investors in terms of what they can financially do to assess where they are, to best equip them to even take perhaps a bird's eye view of their property portfolio, some of the tough decisions that they may have to make. I mean, I know some of the investors, you're having to decide whether to sell or not to sell. Some are, for example, in student accommodation that isn't doing so well, and they're struggling to even, change it from student accommodation to something else because their projected rentals were X amount and they're struggling to get those tenants. So from a practical perspective, in terms of, investors who are in a financially difficult position due to the effects of COVID, how should they be looking at their finances and how to best overcome the economic hardships of the pandemic?
Okay, so with that said, the thing that you need to do is to go back to basics, go back to the drawing board, right? Look at the numbers. I always say property is a numbers game. And I think I always say this on this platform. It's a numbers game. So, and put emotions aside and just use the mind. That's what I always say. Think, use your mind to think rather than using your heart. So like you said, if you're going through financial difficulties, the first thing you need to understand or you need to do is ask yourself the question, who is my creditor? So the bank or whoever that has borrowed you the money, has lent you the money to be able to, be the position that you're in, is the person you need to start the conversation with. But to start the conversation with, you need to look at the numbers, draw up and say, how do I get my way? So for example, during the pandemic, I remember we got a break from the banks. The banks were giving 3-month holidays and the rest. But again, it goes back to the attitude again. So if we were not consistently servicing our bond, we were not going to have that opportunity. So some tenants were not paying for sure. But the bank comes and says, listen, Mr. X, you've been paying for so long, and because that you don't owe anything to us, and we understand where this pandemic is, we're going to give you a 3-month grace. And those are the things that you need to talk to. And if you didn't qualify, you still need to talk to your bank. You don't need to shy away from the situation that you're in. You can only go back as a prodigal son to the person that's giving you that money and says, I cannot pay. And don't just say, I cannot pay, I give up. I cannot pay. These are my numbers, and this is the proposition I put forward. This is the proposal that I propose that we can, alongside, get through.
And Ekow, I think one of the big things that I certainly want to get a bit of perspective from your side on, especially for struggling investors right now, is at which point do you then decide that, you know what, this isn't quite working, let me offload, whether it's one property or two properties from the portfolio? At which point should we be having that conversation with ourselves?
At the point that you know that you're going to drown and ego doesn't play a part. That is the point that you need to, you know that there's nothing. You've worked out your numbers, you've worked it out, and you can't come out. Like there's no ways for you to service this bond. And sometimes letting go of what is called a baggage is actually probably a way to propel you forward, maybe even 10 times forward. So that again, it's that conversation. If you cannot service something and it's just going to end up messing up your credits record, then you need to start having that conversation with the bank or the lender and say to the lender, and the lenders will be happily, they are very helpful to help you to sell. Actually, they can take the deal and give it to estate agents out there to help you find a buyer as quickly. And when you go to the lender, actually what happens is that you get a discount. So lender will say to you, listen, if I sell this property, I know that the market is hard because I know this, because in my group, in the mastermind group that I'm in, some of our investors had to do that. And the lender says, listen, we will sell, the property value is at 1 million, for example. We're not going to get 1 million in the market. But if you sell it through us, we're going to sell it at 800,000 rand, and then we'll give you another 80% discount on the 200 that you owe us. So eventually you only pay us 40,000 rand over time. And if you arrange properly with them, that 40,000 rand will be paid over 5 years. So you still have that, that relief on your neck. And at the same time, if you do that properly with the lender, you are not going to be blacklisted, because remember, the only way that's going to show is you defaulting. Now, if a lender has taken off that property away from you, giving you a discount and brought it down from a 20,000 rand or 10,000 rand to 1,000 rand a month, you are actually in a good position. So when the market turns or when your numbers make sense again and you can breathe properly, you can go back to the same guy and they will gladly help you.
I'm this evening in conversation with Ekow Quagraine, who's a founder of B Grant Holdings, and we're looking at a property investor's guide to surviving the pandemic. I want to hear from you, if you're a property investor, if you're currently financially struggling, how have you been able to I'll say weather the storm? I know we're not at the end just yet, unfortunately, but how have you been able to navigate the storm that way? And I think that's probably a better way of putting it, because we are still unfortunately in the middle of the storm. And what have been some of the tough decisions that you've had to make when it comes to your property investment? I've spoken to a number of different property investors and landlords who've had to offload certain properties because of financial strain, as opposed to because they want to finance other property deals. And sometimes it's not the greatest thing to do, because you may have previously been able to collect really good rentals from that particular property. Perhaps you had really good plans for where you wanted to go with that property in your property portfolio. But as the effects of COVID are affecting us in different ways and in different forms, you've had to reassess your portfolio as much as possible and make the tough decision of letting go of some of the properties. So do let me know if you found yourself in that particular position. Was it a difficult thing to navigate, and were you able to just sit down and have very realistic and tough conversations about what you can and cannot do financially, and the strains really of perhaps your property portfolio, because it is quite strenuous, especially if you've bought into a sectional title, and the various associated costs of owning in a sectional title can be very, very strenuous. And now I want, Ekow, for us to move to the second type of investor, as I mentioned to you earlier, the investor who is now in a position to take advantage of the COVID-19 crisis. There's certainly been a lot of property opportunities that I've seen and that many other property investors have seen. Many of them have started taking advantage of them, and they're very exciting. I mean, some investors have been waiting and kind of, they have some properties in their books, but they've also been putting money aside. They've been managing their portfolio well. And only now when this crisis, has come, this for them is a great opportunity to make big, bold moves. I want us to have a conversation about people who are now ready for, we'll say, those big, bold moves, and how they can best position themselves so that they don't find themselves drowning. Because I think one of the dangers of this, environment, this economic climate, the market that we're finding ourselves in, is it can be very easy to get excited about where we are with the low interest rates, seeing certain opportunities, and then overgearing or putting down far too much money and not doing thorough diligence, and only to find later on that you may have financially shot yourself in the foot. So for the property investors who are ready to, make those bold moves, how do they best make sure that they don't overextend themselves in such a way that in the next, whether it's the next quarter or later on in the year, they don't find themselves financially struggling because of some of the decisions that they may have made during this particular economic climate?
Okay. So again, that's a very good question, Zama, because COVID has proven that nothing is permanent, right? So all good things will one day come to an end, and all bad things one day comes to an end as well. So nothing is permanent. So, and from experience, if you've seen how people are struggling, people being laid off at work, people not going to work, people not being able to do anything, and you find yourself in that position to actually take advantage of this calamity, then that's good, because that's not bad. But again, you need to go back to the numbers. For example, what we do is, even though the interest rate is sitting at 7%, we do our numbers on 12. And that's what we've always been doing, by the way, because we always say, when things are really, really bad, would we still be able to wash our face? And that is the question you need to ask yourself all the time. If things go bad, take care of the negatives, because the positive take care of themselves. That is the thing. So have a positive mindset, but be cautious in your approach. That's what they need to do. So again, you run the numbers and you say, what is the return on investment that am I looking to get? And stress that return on investment number, so that when things really turn bad, you will still be able to discount the market. So if you remember, when we had a conversation, I think in the last 3 episodes that I was on this platform, and I said, Quagraine is doing quite well. Were we collecting 100% rentals? No, we were only collecting 60% of the rentals. But because we were very conservative with our cash flow, we were able to meet. Yes, of course, we got grace period from the bank. Did we really need it? That's a question to be answered. But because we've worked out and we were very conservative, we were able to weather the storm somehow. And then now that the market is opening and we've seen a lot of tenants coming in, it's also a good thing for us. So all I say is that do your 60-40 approach, to say that at least 40% of the time you're going to get a bad market. And therefore your 60% should be able to cover the loan that you've collected or you've asked for from the bank.
Mm-mm. And Ekow, I actually like that tip, because one of the things that we had even been saying on the show when interest rates started going down last year, because even from as early as this time last year, this was obviously before we went online, we'd seen interest rates, starting to go down prior to lockdown. Lockdown happens, and of course we saw the various decreases. One of the big things was, if you're going to be making property decisions, you need to almost use the interest rates as of last year, January, right? And see if you were able to still service the debt that you're going to be taking on. And even perhaps go a step further. Maybe you might want to make it just slightly higher than that, because we don't know how the market is going to recover, in the coming months. And as much as all of the predictions so far has been that we're going to stay in fairly low interest rates for most of this year, if not for all of this year, perhaps even in the beginning part of next year. You want to, because this is a property investment, you're in it for the long run. You want to have made the kind of estimations that come this time next year, if the interest rate goes back to where we were this time last year, you can still afford it. If it goes slightly higher, you're still able to afford it because you budgeted for higher interest rates, and you're not finding yourself struggling, and your portfolio isn't struggling because you underestimated interest rates, or you made financial decisions based on only low interest rates and didn't factor in all the other costs. Because I think, Ekow, one of the other things that we're seeing is interest rates aside, the cost of everything else associated with a particular home is going up, from the rates and taxes, the levies themselves, everything, electricity, all the utility bills have gone up. So it's almost as though using interest rates alone actually isn't sufficient. You want to also look at where the current costs are of the other associated costs of owning a home, and also almost increase that perhaps by 10%. See if you'll still be able to afford it. Underestimate the amount of rental you think you will collect, because I think, Ekow, I don't know if you've seen this. I think a lot of times, when property investors are running their numbers, especially when they're still new in the game, they overestimate how much they think they'll collect in rental. I know I did this, and I got burnt quite badly. But we tend to overestimate our yield when we're starting off. Wouldn't you say, Ekow?
Yes. No, you're right, because people believe that they can change the market. That is where the problem lies. People will come in and say, "Oh yeah, but they're collecting 1,000 rent now, but if I fix this and I fix that, I will collect 2,000, 3,000. That is the wrong approach, because you can't, nobody can make the market. The market fixes itself. COVID has proven it again. So with the market determine where it is. And it could also, as you're saying, what I was actually thinking on top of my head is that the area that you've bought into, we don't know how the future lies with that area. Forget about the pandemic. It could be an area that's going down. It could be some, God forbid, some drug dealer is going to be on that street, and all these people wants to sell because they're not having a peace of mind, because prostitutes are running on the street, and therefore your rental that you anticipated is actually going to be stagnant or even lower, because nobody wants to stay in a place that they don't have proper security. So those are all the things, the economic factors that you need to plug into your model to make that decision. So even though you plug in the numbers model, you also need to bring in the, what do you call that emotional aspect of it, so that you can have a balance. There's no such a thing as a balance, but you kind of get closer to a balanced model. So what you've just said, you've just hit the nail on the head.
The only pushback I will throw your way there, Ekow, is it doesn't matter if sex workers move into your neighborhood, may slightly change the composition of the tenant profile, but there certainly isn't anything wrong there. Now, Ekow, I think then to slightly wrap up our conversation for both our investors, because as we've already so greatly pointed out, is sometimes you may be going through a difficult time financially as a property investor, and you very likely have to make the tough decision of perhaps offloading a property or two, perhaps even more, going back to the drawing board, especially when you realize that trying to keep that property is costing you too much, and the amount of rental that you collect, especially where the price points are at this moment, because I think that's also an important thing to look at, that tenants are able to negotiate their rental at this moment. They're able to shop around a bit more. So perhaps you're not able to collect the kind of rental that you wanted or that you previously were able to collect, that the rising costs of maintaining or keeping that particular property is bleeding your property quite significantly. When you look at all of that, sometimes you may have to make the tough decision of letting go of that property and offloading it as early as possible in your portfolio. There's nothing wrong with that. I think you also just shouldn't feel ashamed of it. Sometimes you may have bought just slightly too high. It's often the pressure pains that a lot of us have had to learn. When they say, when a few years down the line, you'd be like, look, these were some of the mistakes that we've made. And I know a lot of us made rookie mistakes when we were starting off with some of our earlier purchases. But also then to the more seasoned investors, or perhaps those who are looking to take advantage of where the market currently is, do not overgear yourself. Don't overextend yourself. I think, as Ekow was saying, try to be prudent in your estimations and rather work with a higher interest rate than where we're currently at now, and see if you'd still be able to afford it at that price point. And if not, perhaps maybe rein it back just slightly, because we don't know how long we're still going to be feeling the economic effects of this COVID-19. Now, Ekow, before I let you go, I think what's the one thing that both sets of investors should always bear in mind when it comes to making sure that they get through the other side of this pandemic in the best financial position possible?
Okay, so I think I will just sum it up in three folds. The first thing is you must surround yourself with the right people. So you must have a mastermind group. You must have a network of people, knowledge that you can tap into, whether you're a seasoned investor or you're just a newbie. You never stop learning. So that's one. Second thing is you must be able to adapt to change, and adapt to change very quickly so that you can enjoy change and be ready to change quickly again and again. And that's exactly similar to what you've just said, by saying that you need to be very careful in terms of not overgearing yourself, right? So that's, and that third point is the best asset you have is what is in between your ears, your mind, right? So you shouldn't lose your head because it's the best part of your body. So keep on thinking and learn and educate yourself, and don't be shy to ask for advice. We all make mistakes, but the best person is the person who makes mistakes, corrects the mistakes, learn from experienced people, and bounce back. There's no, you don't have to have ego in this kind of business. Like you said, if you drowning, there's nobody stopping you to sell your property. So you have to just mind your own business, because at the end of the day, nobody put a gun to your head to go buy that property. You did. You made that decision. So irrespective of what Ekow thinks or what Zama thinks, the question is, would you be able to come out successfully and then repackage your portfolio so that you can have somebody to pay for the bond? Basically, you need to think to be the middleman between yourself and the tenant and the lender. Lender says, I want 1 rand. Tenant must be able to give you 1.50 rand. That is my advice.
And we're going to leave it there. That is Ekow Quagraine, who's a founder of Be Grand Holdings. Thank you so much, Ekow, for joining us this evening. It's always a pleasure talking property with you.
It's a pleasure, Zama. Have a good night.
And we're going to leave it there with Ekow. But as you know, because it is a Wednesday, we've got that 500 Rand spot prize giveaway. You have to stay on the live in order to claim your prize. If we call out your name, we want you to drop us a message down here below. We're going to go for a quick break and we'll be back just after this. Welcome back to episode 212 of the Private Property Podcast. I'm your host, Uzamantungwa Kumalo. Well, it is that time of the evening where we get to give away 500 Rand cash spot prize for our Sherlock Holmes competition. If we call your name, I'm going to give you a minute to drop us a text down here below in order to claim your prize. And the potential winner of that 500 Rand cash prize is Queen Tako. Queen Tako, if you're watching, you're on the live, drop us a message down here below to claim your 500 Rand cash prize. That is Queen Tako. And if you want to be like Queen, all you have to do is enter the Sherlock Holmes competition on our website. That's www.privateproperty.co.za. And every Wednesdays and Thursdays, we pick a lucky winner who walks away with 500 Rand in cash just by entering the competition. And all you have to do to claim that prize is to be watching us live. And when we call your name, send us a message to claim your prize. So Queen Tako, we are waiting for you to send us that message down here below. I'm going to give you a minute to just drop us a message. I'm also waiting for my colleague to let me know. There we go. Queen Tako saying, I'm here. Well, congratulations, Queen. You walk away with the 500 Rand cash spot prize for our Sherlock Holmes competition. And I love it when people are watching us live, because then they get to get their money instead of watching the following day and realizing that, you know, that one episode you missed is the one where we called your name. Well, that's certainly more incentive for you to make sure you do not miss any episode of the Private Property Podcast. Well, that's it from me, Zamantungwa Kumalo, and the rest of the team. Mbali Nogo, not even Mbali, it's actually Wednesday this evening, so it's Esty Klassen will be taking you for the first time home buyer show at 8 p.m. Until then, hoping you're staying home and staying safe.